菜根谭
Tending the roots of wisdom.
329，勿待兴尽，适可而止。
329. Do not wait until enthusiasm is exhausted. Stop at an appropriate moment.
菜根谭原文：笙歌正浓处，便自扶衣长网。现达人，撒手悬崖，更漏已残时。悠然夜行不休，笑俗世，沉深苦海。
白话文注解：当歌舞盛宴达到最高潮时，就自行整理衣袖，毫不留恋地离开。那些明理人能在紧要处悬崖勒马，真是令人羡慕。夜深入境仍然忙着应酬的人，已然堕入无边痛苦而不自觉，说来真是可笑。
329-1. When a festive celebration of song and dance reaches its climax, wise individuals gracefully leave without hesitation, just as one would tidy their sleeves and depart. Such people are admirable for their ability to exercise restraint at critical moments. On the other hand, those who remain engrossed in socializing during the late hours of the night inadvertently fall into boundless suffering without realizing it. It's truly ironic. Translated by Bayandefu.
329-2. Those who pick up their coats to depart at the height of festivity are admired as adepts who can halt at the precipice. Those who pursue their night journey after their candle has burned out are ridiculed as ordinary persons awash in the bitter sea. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 329-3. A man who can adjust his clothing and depart without regret just when the revelry is at its height is an enlightened man who knows how to rein in his horse at the edge of the precipice. He arouses universal admiration. A man who is still caught up in scheming for fame and wealth even deep into the night is an unworthy fellow who is sinking in the sea of bitterness. He provokes only scornful laughter. Translated by Paul White.
329-4. When the revelry of song and dance reaches its peak, wise individuals gracefully leave, without a trace of attachment. It is admirable how those who understand propriety can rein in their desires at a crucial moment. On the contrary, those who continue to engage in socializing deep into the night, unaware of the boundless pain they are falling into, appear quite comical. Translated by Wen Lin.
330，修行绝尘，悟道涉俗。
330. In cultivation, stay clear of worldly dust. Yet in enlightenment, navigate through mundane affairs.
菜根谭原文：把握未定，宜绝迹尘嚣，使此心不见可欲，而不乱，以成物无净体。操持极间，又当混迹风尘，使此心见可欲，而亦不乱，以养无缘机。
白话文注解：当意志薄弱、自制力不够时，就应远离物欲环境的诱惑，让自己眼不见为净，就不会心神迷乱，这样才能保持身心清明纯净的本色。等到意志坚定，可以自我控制时，就要让自己回到世俗社会，经受各种考验，即便看到各种诱惑，也不会心神迷乱，从而培养自己质朴圆钝的灵机。
330-1. When one's will is weak and self-control is lacking, it's important to distance oneself from the temptations of material desires. By not exposing oneself to such influences, one can avoid getting mentally entangled. This helps in maintaining the innate clarity and purity of body and mind. When one's willpower becomes strong and self-discipline is established, then it's time to re-engage with the worldly environment and face various challenges. Even in the presence of temptations, a strong and undistracted mind can be cultivated, allowing for the development of a simple and natural wisdom. Translated by Bayandefu.
330-2. If you are not yet in firm control of yourself, you should shun the hurly-burly world so that your mind will not be tempted by desires. Avoid being disturbed and become aware of your quiet nature. If you are in full control, you can mix with the world, and your mind, though encountering temptations and desires, will not be flustered. Thus you nurture your tranquil nature. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 330-3. If your efforts to cultivate your mind and improve your conduct are not very successful, and you still lack the ability to master worldly desires, you should shun vulgar society so that things that will arouse lowly desires may not confuse your mind. This will keep you tranquil and pure. When your efforts come to a successful conclusion, equipping you with the ability to withstand worldly temptations, you should return to society, for your mind will not be led astray by exposure to mean desires. This is the way to achieve perfection in cultivating your virtues and merits. Translated by Paul White.
330-4. When one's will is weak and self-control is lacking, it is advisable to distance oneself from the temptations of a materialistic environment. By keeping one's eyes away from impurities, the mind remains clear and undisturbed, allowing for the maintenance of a pure and tranquil state of body and mind. Once the will is strengthened, and self-control is established, it is then suitable to re-engage with the complexities of the worldly society, facing various temptations without being mentally swayed. This process aids in cultivating a simple and composed wisdom. Translated by Wen Lin.
331. 人我一事，动静两忘。
331. Seeing others and myself as one. Forgetting distinctions in activity and stillness.
菜根谭原文：喜极厌轩者，往往避人以求静，不知意在无人，便成我相。心着于静，便是动根，如何道德？人我一事，动静两忘的境界。
白话文注解：一个喜欢清静讨厌喧嚣的人，往往离群所居来求取安宁，却不知刻意排除他人便会陷入重视小我。一心求静的结果是，一旦遇到喧嚣，就会烦躁不安。可见一心着眼于求静，反而是动乱的祸源。人我本是一体的，而动静也是互相关联的。假如不能忘怀自我，只知一味过分强调宁静，又如何能达到真正安宁的境界呢？
331-1. A person who prefers tranquility and dislikes noise often seeks solitude to find peace. However, they may not realize that intentionally excluding others can lead to an exaggerated focus on the self. The single-minded pursuit of stillness can ironically result in restlessness and agitation when faced with noise. This shows that solely fixating on seeking stillness can become a source of disturbance. Humans are inherently interconnected, and the concepts of movement and stillness are interrelated. If one cannot forget the self and only emphasizes tranquility to an extreme degree, how can they truly reach a state of genuine peace? Translated by Bayan Defu.
331-2. Those who prefer quiet to noise tend to avoid people and seek solitude. They don't know that just thinking of avoiding people simply engenders the self, that thinking to be quiet is itself the spark to become active. How can they realize that others and they are actually one, and reach the point where there is no distinction between activity and repose? Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 331-3. Those who love quietude and hate noise often flee from the world of men, and seek solitude. They do not realize that by doing so, they have burdened themselves with fresh worries, which stem from a pursuit to exclude others, an effort that attaches too much importance to the physical existence of human beings. Seeking quietude causes anxiety to move away. So how can we in this case cultivate the ability to treat others like ourselves, and forget all distinction between motion and stillness? Translated by Paul White.
331-4. A person who prefers tranquility and dislikes noise often seeks solitude in pursuit of peace. However, they may not realize that deliberately excluding others can lead to a heightened focus on the self. The desire for tranquility can result in irritability and restlessness when faced with noise. It is evident that solely focusing on the pursuit of stillness can become a source of turmoil. Humans are inherently interconnected, and stillness and activity are interrelated. If one cannot forget the self and only emphasizes tranquility excessively, how can they truly attain a state of genuine peace? Translated by Wen Lin.
332. 山居清洒，入都俗气。
332. Residing in the mountains, one experiences tranquility and freedom. Entering the city, one encounters the bustling and mundane atmosphere of the streets.
菜根谭原文：山居凶刺清洒，处物皆有家私，见孤云野鹤，而起超绝之想；遇石涧流泉，而动凿雪之思；扶老桂寒梅，而尽节挺立；履沙鸥迷路，而机心顿忘。若亦走入尘寰，无论物不相关，即此身亦属坠流矣。
白话文注解：隐居在山间，胸怀自然开朗洒脱，所接触的事物自然都能引起家思，看见孤云野鹤，就会生出超尘脱俗的观念；遇到山谷溪涧的流泉，就会引起涤荡一切世俗杂念的思想；抚摸耸立在风霜中的老桂寒梅，心中会涌起效法他们威武不屈、坚毅气节的愿望；中年与温和的沙鸥和麋鹿在一起，会使一切勾心斗角的邪念全消。假如再度走回繁嚣的都市，除了与周围的环境事物很不搭，觉得自己就像旗帜上的飘带那样实属多余。
332-1. Residing hidden within the mountains. With a heart open, cheerful, and unrestrained by nature, one naturally finds inspiration in everything encountered. Upon seeing solitary clouds and wild cranes, the notion of transcending the mundane arises. Encountering the flowing springs of mountain valleys and streams prompts thoughts of cleansing away all worldly distractions. Caressing weathered old cypress and cold plum blossoms standing tall against wind and frost stirs a desire to emulate their steadfast and unyielding spirit. Spending the entire year alongside gentle seagulls and deer erases all petty and scheming thoughts. Yet, returning to the bustling city feels incongruous, as if one's presence is as superfluous as a ribbon on a flag. Translated by Bayandefu.
332-2. One is fresh and at ease living in the mountains, everything touched occasions a pleasant thought. Viewing a single cloud and a wild crane can bring transcendence to mind. Fording a pebbled brook can make one think of becoming pure. Touching a gnarled juniper or the winter plum tree can firm up one's resolve. Keeping the company of gulls and deer can clear the mind of calculated scheming. With just one step into the worldly dust, though external matters might not ensnare you, you will surely belong to the depraved. Translated by Robert Aitken and Daniel W. Wyckoff. 332-3. Living in the mountains with a fresh mind. Everything one comes into contact with can give rise to beautiful ideas and impressions. Gazing upon a wisp of leisurely cloud or a flock of wild cranes can stimulate sublime thoughts. Coming across a gurgling stream or babbling brook can induce yearnings to dispel all foulness from both body and mind. Caressing a juniper or plum tree can in an instant spur the gushing forth of notions of sturdy integrity. With gulls and deer for companions, all traces of scheming and trickery vanish from the mind. But once back in worldly society, one not only becomes ensnared by external things, but also becomes an ornament for others. Translated by Paul White.
332-4. In seclusion within the mountains, one's heart is open, cheerful, and carefree. All encountered things naturally inspire positive thoughts. Seeing solitary clouds and wild cranes can evoke thoughts of transcending the mundane. Encountering the flowing springs of mountain valleys and streams can lead to thoughts of purging worldly distractions. Touching the weathered old cypress and cold plum blossoms standing against the wind and frost can ignite a desire to emulate their robust, unyielding, and determined spirit. Spending the entire year with gentle sandpipers and muntjac can dispel all scheming and sinister thoughts. If one were to return to the bustling city, not only would they feel out of sync with the surrounding environment, but they might also feel as superfluous as the streamers on a flag. Translated by Wen Lin.
333. 人我合一，云流鸟伴。
333. In the unity of self and others, clouds linger with the company of birds.
菜根谭原文：杏竹时来，芳草中撒缕闲行，野鸟望鸡时作伴。 景与心会，落花下披荆勿作，白云无语慢相留。
白话文注解：兴致所致，何妨脱下鞋袜，光脚在草地上散步，就连野鸟也会忘记被人捕捉的危险，和我作伴。风景与我的心思交融，披着衣裳静坐在落花之下沉思，白云默默作陪，把我一一挽留。
333-1. Driven by enthusiasm, why not take off shoes and socks, walking barefoot on the grassy meadow? Even the wild birds might forget the danger of human capture and accompany me. The scenery blends with my thoughts, and draped in clothing, I sit quietly beneath falling petals, lost in contemplation. White clouds silently keep me company, reluctant to let me go. Translated by Bayandefu.
333-2. When the occasion arises, walk barefoot in the fragrant grass and keep company with birds freely flying about. When the mind becomes one with the scene, put on a cape and sit amid fallen petals. The silent clouds will tarry and keep you company. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 333-3. When a feeling of delight comes over you, walk at leisure barefoot in the fragrant grass. Then the wild birds will forget all human treachery and snares, and flutter and play along with you. When you blend with your surroundings and sit lost in thought beneath tree branches laden with blossoms, with your outer garment loosened, the silent clouds seem to be asking you to stay longer. Translated by Paul White.
333-4. Driven by a spontaneous impulse, why not take off shoes and socks and walk barefoot on the grass? Even the wild birds forget the danger of being captured and accompany me. The scenery blends with my thoughts as I sit quietly under the falling petals, contemplating. The white clouds silently keep me company, reluctant to let me go. Translated by Wen Lin.
334. 祸福苦乐，一念之差。
334. Misfortune and fortune, suffering and joy, all hinge on a single thought.
菜根谭原文：人生福境祸凶，皆念想造成。故世事云：利欲炽然即是火坑，贪爱沉溺变为苦海。一念清净烈焰成池，一念警觉传灯彼岸。念头稍异，境界顿殊，可不慎哉。
白话文注解：人生是祸是福，全是由自己的观念所造成。所以释迦牟尼佛说，利欲熏心，便是跳进了火坑；贪得无厌，就会沉入苦海。一念清净，火坑会变成水池；一念警觉，便可脱离苦海，船靠岸。可见意识观念略有不同，人生境界就会大不一样。所以一个人的起心动念不可不慎重啊。
334-1. Whether life is a blessing or a curse is entirely determined by one's own perceptions. That's why Gautama Buddha said, when the mind is consumed by desires, it's like jumping into a pit of fire. Insatiable greed leads to sinking in the sea of suffering. With a pure thought, a pit of fire turns into a pool, and with alertness, one can sail ashore from the sea of suffering. This illustrates that with different conscious perspectives, the realm of one's life can greatly vary. Thus, one's intentions and thoughts must be handled with utmost care. Translated by Bayandefu.
334-2. Fortune and calamity are made in the mind. Thus Buddhism states, strong burning desires are the fiery pit. To indulge in greed and avarice is to fall into the sea of bitterness. One clear and calm thought turns the fiery pit into a clear pond, and one bit of alertness enables the boat to reach shore. We therefore see that one shift in thought can change everything. Can we afford not to be vigilant? Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 334-3. Happiness and sadness both spring from the mind. Thus, according to Buddhist teaching, greed is like a raging fire, it is a fiery pit. To immerse oneself in avarice and covetousness is to sink one's body into a sea of bitterness. Whereas seeking quietude can change the fiery pit into a cooling moat, and guarding against greed can guide the boat to shore. From this, we can see that even a minute shift in thought can immediately change the world we find ourselves in. Does it not follow that we should exercise the utmost vigilance over our thoughts? Translated by Paul White.
334-4. Whether life is a calamity or a blessing is entirely determined by one's own perspective. As Gautama Buddha said, when the mind is consumed by desire, it is like jumping into a fire pit. Insatiable greed leads to sinking into the sea of suffering. With a pure thought, the fire pit can turn into a pool. And with a vigilant mind, one can escape the sea of suffering and bring the boat ashore. This highlights the significance of consciousness and perspective. Slight differences can lead to vastly different life experiences. Therefore, one must be cautious and mindful of their intentions and thoughts. Translated by Wen Lin.
335. 功夫若深，铁杵成针。
335. If the skill is profound, even an iron rod can be turned into a needle.
菜根谭原文：绳锯木断，水滴石穿，学道者须加利索，水到渠成，瓜熟蒂落，得道者一任天机。
白话文注解：绳索摩擦木头时间久了可锯断木头，水滴落在石头上时间久了可贯通磐石。同理，做学问的人也要努力用功才能有所成就。各方细水汇集在一起，自然能形成一道河流。瓜果成熟之后，自然会脱离枝蔓而掉落。同理，修行学道的人也要遵循自然规律，才能获得正果。
335-1. Over time, a rope rubbing against wood can eventually saw through the wood, and a water droplet falling on a stone can penetrate the rock. Similarly, those who pursue knowledge must put in diligent effort to achieve results. Just as various small streams converge to form a river, and fruits naturally fall from their vines when ripe, those on a spiritual journey must also follow the natural laws to attain genuine accomplishments. Translated by Bayandefu.
335-2. A rope saw will cut through the wood, as water will wear through a stone. You who cultivate the Tao should persevere in your quest. The watercourse forms when the stream approaches, and the melon drops when ripe. One achieves the Tao by letting it happen. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 335-3. With time, a rope can saw through a block of wood, and dripping water can bore a hole in a rock. In the same way, he who cultivates the way must constantly exert himself in his explorations. Where water flows, a channel is formed. When a melon ripens, it falls off its stem. Thus, the person who wishes to master the way only has to persevere in self-cultivation, and he will eventually become accomplished. Translated by Paul White.
335-4. The friction of a rope against wood over time can eventually saw through the wood. Similarly, the consistent falling of water drops on a stone can eventually penetrate even the hardest rock. Likewise, those engaged in scholarly pursuits must put in persistent effort to achieve success. Just as various small streams converge to form a river, and fruits naturally detach from the branches when ripe, practitioners of spiritual cultivation must adhere to natural laws to attain positive results. Translated by Wen Lin.
336. 积息心清，月到风来。
336. With the cessation of thoughts, the mind becomes clear, the moon comes up and the wind arises.
菜根谭原文：积息时便有月到风来，不必苦海人事。心远处自无车尘马迹，何须顾及秋山。
白话文注解：心中停止一切算计之后，就会有明月清风相伴，从此不再为人间的烦恼而痛苦，思想远远超脱世俗，自然不会介意外面的车马喧嚣之声，也就无需刻意隐居山林。
336-1. Once all calculations cease within the mind, one will be accompanied by the bright moon and the refreshing breeze, no longer tormented by earthly troubles. With thoughts transcending the mundane, there's no concern for the clamor of the outside world, and the need for intentional seclusion in the mountains and forests diminishes. Translated by Bayandefu.
336-2, when desire and want are quiet, the moon comes up and the wind arises, there is no need to languish in a sea of bitterness. With the mind detached, dust and hustle disappear, and there is no need to be a hermit in the hills. Translated by Robert Aitken Daniel W. Wyckoff. 336-3, when worldly plotting and striving for advantage are banished from the heart, you will appreciate the beauty of the bright and clear moonlight and spring breeze. There is no need to regard human life as a sea of bitterness from which there is the vulgar world, and the clamor of everyday things will no longer be heard, there is no need to go and live as a hermit in the hills. Translated by Paul White.
336-4. Once all calculations cease within the heart, one will find companionship in the clear moon and gentle breeze, and henceforth, no longer suffer from earthly troubles. When thoughts transcend the mundane, there is no concern for the noise of carriages and the clamor of instruments outside, and there is no need to intentionally seclude oneself in the mountains and forests. Translated by Wen Lin.